Hello, everybody. Back for Thursday's work. Today's topic is Neo-Freudians. Our focus question is, how have other psychologists adapted Freud's ideas? So same deal as last time. I'm going to run through these, and then you're going to pause me if you need to work through some of this stuff. This should be pretty straightforward today. If you haven't done the defense mechanisms quiz from Wednesday, that is something you should do. We're going to jump right in. I'm going to work you through some interesting ideas. Hopefully they're interesting for you, and then we'll call it a day. So let's start here. The first of the Neo-Freudians. They're called Neo-Freudians because they took Freud's ideas and they kind of took them in different directions. The first person is Carl Jung. I know his name is spelled with a J, but you pronounce it with a Y sound, Carl Jung. He is known as the crowned prince of psychoanalysis. He was kind of having a bromance with Freud, and as Freud is getting older, people kind of assume Jung is going to kind of take on the mantle of psychoanalysis and kind of run with this. So he's very much in the same mindset as Freud in terms of focusing on the unconscious. The difference with Jung is that he takes some of Freud's ideas with the unconscious and then adds things to it. So he uses Freudian theory. He also adds in all kinds of stuff related to religion and mythology and philosophy. And I am just going to tell you right now, if you want a challenging read, find a book by Carl Jung and try to digest it. It's pretty dense, but pretty interesting as well. So what we're going to be focusing on today is really what some of the changes are from these psychologists, how they take Freud's ideas and kind of add to them or modify them in some way. So Jung agrees with Freud on many ideas, but disagrees on two major points. And the first is that all that focus with Freud on sex and aggression, those urges that are driving behavior, Jung says people also try to develop their potential. It's not just sex and aggression. There are other things that are driving human behavior. And I think that for most of us is like, well, duh, right? That makes sense. He also adds in this idea called the collective unconscious. And so he buys into the idea of the unconscious as this kind of deep well of influence on us that we're not really aware of. But he says there's another even deeper well there. And we'll kind of go into that. It's defined in your text as the inherited instincts, urges, and memories that are common to all people. And this is where Jung's idea of the archetypes shows up. And so when we're talking about the collective unconscious, there's a video here I'm gonna tell you to pause me and go into the slides and watch this because it'll, I think, give you kind of the quick version of what archetypes are, but I'm going to just trudge forward and skip through it. When we look at the archetypes, the reason that these types are familiar to us is because of the collective unconscious. So Jung says that we're born with this inheritance, this cultural inheritance that we just kind of instinctively understand certain things. And the reason that these things look familiar and the reason these things show up in just about every story that we tell and are repeated over and over again is because they're part of our collective unconscious. So if you look at this list of archetypes, you can see lots of different ways that these are portrayed online. But you'll notice that they're commonly showing up in a variety of different stories. So everything from Star Wars to Harry Potter to Lord of the Rings to whatever. I mean, this goes on and on. This was just a list somebody put together. So we have kind of the hero that shows up in the story. We have the wise old man or the ancient mystagogue. We have the enemy or the dark force. Jung calls this the shadow. We have the guardian of the threshold. We have the shapeshifter. We have the trickster. The reason that these stories are so successful, some would argue, Jung might argue, is that they rely on those archetypes, and these are things that we kind of instinctively understand. So Jung's model of the mind starts with the ego. That's, again, our conscious mind. That's similar to Freud. He talks about the personal unconscious, which is very much the same thing as Freud's idea of the unconscious. These are memories that are remembered and repressed. He really doesn't focus in on those instincts being the driver, right? But the memories that we have, that we remember, and also the memories we've repressed, the things that kind of influence us. And then he adds in this third piece called the collective unconscious. So instead of id, ego, superego, Jung's model is ego, personal unconscious, collective unconscious. So our psychic inheritance, again, that reservoir of our inheritance as a species, the knowledge we are born with, that makes up then, the very depths of our unconscious mind. So as a baby, when you come into the world, Jung says you instinctively understand like a mother figure and a hero and all of these other archetypes because it's part of our collective unconscious. We then have the unconscious mind, memories, remembered and repressed, and then we have our ego up at the top, the conscious part of our mind. So similar ideas, but kind of shifted to adapt this new idea. If you are bored, if you're curious about Jung, watch some of this video. It'll give you a little bit of his background. And once you kind of hear some of his story, it kind of makes sense how he gets to this place. This guy is like smart beyond what I think many people can manage. But it is pretty interesting. I think you can get through much of it without overloading. So again, if you want, pause me, take a look at that, and it'll go into some more details on Jung. So Jung is our first one. Our second neo-Freudian is called Alfred Adler. He was another associate of Freud. Freud has all these psychologists that are kind of in his circle and people that are taking his ideas and kind of running with them. He also disagrees with Freud in the sense that he says people are driven by social urges, not just our biological urges, not just sex and aggression. So he says people are also driven by social urges. And again, this makes sense that when we said on Tuesday that it might be a little limiting to say that human behavior is just sex and aggression. So these are other psychologists saying, yeah, well, also, right, social urges. So each person is a social being with unique personality. And Adler believed that the driving force in people's lives is a desire to overcome their feelings of inferiority. When we don't feel as good as other people, that's a feeling of inferiority. If you feel like you're better than everybody else, that's superiority, right? I feel superior. But inferiority, he says, is a driving force in people's lives. When you don't feel as good as other people, then that pushes you to do more, to work harder, to try harder. He then says there is a related concept that comes up he calls it the inferiority complex. A person that is continually compensating for weakness and trying to avoid feelings of inadequacy, not feeling as good as other people. If I develop this inferiority complex, it means I'm always feeling like I'm not as good as somebody else. And he says this is problematic if you're in that place. But he says it's normal for people to have those feelings be kind of a driving force, right? Because we are social people, and we, are trying to be out there in the world and be around other people, and we don't want to feel like we're less than. So that's what drives us to do the things that we do. There's a couple of other neo-Freudians that show up. Erich Fromm is one. His ideas are centered on the need to belong and the loneliness that freedom brings. And again, not so much that we're necessarily knowing all the details of all these people, but getting the sense that there are a lot of these psychologists who are taking Freud's ideas and kind of adding their twist to them. Our next one is Karen Horney, is how you say her name. She stressed the importance of basic anxiety And she says, children feel this because they're helpless, right? If as a baby you can't do anything for yourself, you need someone else to take care of them. And you develop hostility because of that anxiety. You resent your parents. So Horney says if a child is raised in an atmosphere of love and security, they could avoid these parent conflicts. If they're not getting the things that they need, then that can develop into certain personality problems. So again, big ideas from some of these psychologists. Big picture, if we connect the dots on all of these, beyond getting into the particulars of some of these psychologists, Neo-Freudians agreed with Freud's basic ideas on the unconscious, some of the kind of big picture things. When we get into the weeds in terms of biological urges like sex and aggression, they're adding a twist saying, no, it's not just that, it's also these other things. So in your notes, if you can connect on a very basic level names and kind of the big idea that they added or the twist that they added in for Fromm and Horney, for Adler, and for Jung, then you're going to be in pretty good shape. My suggestion is to take a look at those 2 video clips. For sure, the one on archetypes, this one, it's short. If you want to get into some more on Jung, you have some time here. I'm going to cut this short so that we're not spending our whole day listening to me. You should be keeping up with the reading. I did add into the agenda for this week. We should be now finished with chapter 14, section 2. You should be working on your way to chapter 14, section 4 for Friday. That'll cover the humanistic and cognitive theories. If you're just looking for something to do, section 3 basically talks about some of the learning theories that we already covered. It talks about Skinner and Bandura and how those can relate to personality, but we're going to kind of skip over that. That's all I have for you today. Have a good afternoon. I will see everybody again on Monday, hopefully. Tomorrow, I'll also have another video posted for you. Remember, I have a sub day, so look for that. Take care.